Adrian, I've known you for a few years. You're a good candidate. You're progressive, and you're running in rural Missouri, quasi-rural with Columbia,
Yeah.
but still, it's mostly rural up there. And I wanted to get an opportunity to have you sit down on Table Talk. And thank you for taking time out of your schedule so that we can talk about issues that are dear to me with the labor unions and American-made products and things like that, school boards, and get your take and your perspectives on them and find out why you think you're the best candidate for the 47th district.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about, actually. Let me tell everybody a little bit about who I am right off the bat here. My name is Adrian Plank. I'm running for Missouri House, the 47th district. It's my third run. They have redrawn the lines and made my district more winnable. They went from a 48 DPI to a 54.2. So it went from shaved Republican to shaved Democrat. That doesn't mean that you can't slack off, but we still got to work it. With that, I'm a small town guy. I'm from the big city of Huntsville, Missouri, which is west of Moberly. When I was young, my parents were right out of high school, and there was two boys on the way right away. Me and my brother Lauren, there's four of us total. We were poor. Dad was working 3 part-time jobs. He worked for a seed company, Walmart, and one other place that was not, I mean, it wasn't worth really working for, but I don't even know what it is now. But we lived in a little trailer house in Brookfield, Missouri, right next to the railroad tracks, and that's no kidding. We could throw a rock even at 1 and 2 years old and hit the train. It was not a good place to bring kids up. We weren't there long. We went to we ended up staying with our grandparents. It had a small farm, raised cows, raised about everything. He had 1 milk cow, which basically means if you got one, you might as well have 30 of them. But he raised calves, and so we got to grow up on the farm to some degree, play in the hay, and learn that we had allergies. But my grandpa was a pretty cool fella. He had his own lumber yard, Plank Lumber, which I always think is pretty humorous. But he cut his own lumber and he built pole barns. About the only time he ever made money, according to my dad. Well, that was a good place for us to grow up, on the farm. They had an acre garden, which is huge. And they were always canning and doing those farm tasks. And it was good food. It's something we miss today. So, of course, Dad was struggling, Mom was struggling. And of course, when you struggle financially, there's a lot of fights. So we decided to pack up our bags and we moved to Huntsville, Missouri, where the schools were well funded and the teachers were paid well, and because they got tax dollars from the Thomas Hill power plant. So when we moved to Huntsville, Dad applied to the power plant, and he is now retired from there as of 33 years of service in a union job. So when my dad got that job, that brought us out of poverty, allowed us to have health care and dental and eye for the kids. We, with 4 boys, at that time there was 4 boys. Even basketball shoes was a drain on your checking account, right?
Hey.
So if Dad wouldn't have got that job, I wouldn't be here today. Neither would my brothers, even though they're not really, how do I put that politely? They know where they came from, but they don't really support the union like I do. So that's about as polite as I can put that.
Right. And you remember you're a journeyman in the carpenters union.
Yeah.
So
Yes. Yeah, that's right. And so I had my own business for 10 years after I left home, and we put granite in motels, my own non-union company. I lost it in the Bush Republican recession of 08. I was kind of beside myself. Wasn't too long after this, I met you, actually. I got politically active. Didn't know what else to do with myself.
right.
So the gentleman came along, the name of Bernie Sanders. He was able to speak to me and made me realize that those people at the top who ruined our economy and didn't allow us because of public policy to bail us out. So I was in lingo for a while, and I decided time to join the union.
Right.
So I went to the Carpenters Hall and told them what I was doing. I said, I need a job. I need a place that'll support my political aspirations, because I was committed at that point. So I began doing a lot of door knocking for Bernie Sanders. And as a matter of fact, I did it in 3 different states, Missouri, Iowa, and Kentucky. You know, we formed a group, Our Revolution Mid-Missouri, which is a spinoff of the Bernie Sanders campaign. It's just it was a way to keep a lot of those people active after Bernie was done. And a lot of them are still around. So if you all haven't heard of Our Revolution, it's something to look up. It is nationwide, and there's many of them in Missouri, actually. So that kind of gives you the story of me. What other questions do you have, Glenn?
Well, coming from the background that you've came from, and your family, your dad was union, your brothers aren't, you've already said that, and you got introduced to the union at a little bit later stage in life than a lot of people.
Right.
But obviously you recognize the important role that unions play, not just in our economy, but how they represent workers and how the representation of workers influences the non-union people in the area as well. And one of the questions that I ask every candidate that comes on is, what's their position on right to work? I think I know it, but I'd like to hear your explanation.
Yeah, I mean, that's we've had a pretty good battle in Missouri here not too long ago. And my position on right to work is that we shouldn't have it. That right to work term is misleading. It has nothing to do with having the right to work. And so whenever they started pushing it, I've collected hundreds of signatures for ballot initiatives to defeat it. Put out a bunch of signs. Any signs that were put up around here that said vote no on right to work, I had a hand in it. So we put a lot of course, knocked doors for that too. We had a lot of different unions get involved with that. So it was boots on the ground, and that's something that we as Missourians and union folks are to be proud of. And that fight, sadly to say, is probably not the end of it. I think that's something they'll always bring up. They try and introduce new legislation for right to work every freaking year. And I think it's a shame because we as unions, we've got to spend money to defeat that, and when that money can be used for something better.
I think I'm sorry, but I think that's the ultimate goal, that the Republicans push it. And that, combined with the fact that once they do get it passed and we can no longer repeal it, it'll be in place and we'll never get rid of it. And yeah, I think the union spent about $10 million defeating it in 2018. Missouri is the only state in the country that's defeated right to work at the polls, and we've done it twice, in 1978 and again in 2018.
60 was it 7%? 62, I don't remember now.
62%. And the Republicans immediately ignored the will of the people. I think only 14 states in the 14 counties in the whole state voted for right to work. Every other county voted against it. And I'm pulling the numbers off the top of my head, so it may not be 100% accurate, but I think that's right.
You're doing good.
And then I actually met with the state representative, and right after the 2018 election, and I said to him, it was obviously the will of the people for you to return to Jeff City and represent them. So congratulations to you. And I said, but it was also obviously the will of the people in your district to oppose Proposition A, which was right to work in 2018. So since you're willing to honor the will of the people by returning to Jeff City, I'm sure we can count on you to honor the will of the people and oppose right to work from here on out. And the individual says, well, I don't think they really knew what they were voting for when they voted against right to work. They vote for me knowing that I am for right to work. So obviously they want me to continue with what my beliefs are, even though the district voted against it. That's how little they care about the voters in the state of Missouri, but they keep getting voted in.
They do. And And not just one or two. There's many of them. So I mean, even
There
the
is.
been running against, he's a right to work guy, and he says if somebody else doesn't introduce it, he will. So I mean, that's old Chuck Basey for you. But he's turned out this time. So
Well, I
well,
just saw his name today. I guess it's all over social media. He sent a letter to a retired school teacher
he
telling her to
did.
get all caught up in her feelings. He didn't care. So,
Chuck's been an interesting character around here. He's attacked CPS, which is Columbia Public Schools, the superintendent, who has been in office for his position for like 6 or 8 months when he was attacking him, over CRT and all this nonsense. And so he's called the teachers and the teachers union liars, and not said, hey, what are you lying about? I mean, he's a man of division. I mean, this is a guy that's got a Brandon flag in his yard. So it doesn't really matter what facts are or what the reality is, or what's best for the community. It's more about the rhetoric. And I'm not, I can honestly say that I'm not really a grandstander, but Chuck Basey, even though he's soft spoken, he's a grandstander, and that's a shame that we have to have those types of politicians pushing policy.
right. One of the things that I look for when I look for someone that is pro-labor, and when I was involved in the endorsement process with the United Auto Workers, I always wanted somebody that would not just go to Jeff City and be a solid vote for organized labor, but someone that would carry the banner, that would probably stand out on that floor, and they'd give them hell when they were trying to pass legislation that was bad. And we've got some. We've had some wonderful, absolutely perfect state representatives and state senators that have been waging battle against these right wingers and anti-work Republicans for decades in Missouri. And that's kind of where I'm hoping you'll be. You may be soft-spoken, but I have no doubt that when it comes to defending the rights of people to join unions and to be represented by a union, you'll be a steadfast ally.
Well, and honestly, Glenn, I feel like I'm probably the strongest, and maybe I'm not, but I feel like I'm the strongest union candidate in the state of Missouri. And I feel that way because of the work that I put in. When you all were striking at the UAW, I didn't just sit back. I went to my local and said, hey, they could use some help. And we was able to get you some help. It wasn't much, but it was something. We had Budweiser here in town strike, which I used to work for Budweiser back in the day, a long time ago. And I knew some of those guys. And I said, what do you need? And then, they're sitting out there striking under a tent. And I went to my freezer and got them some pork chops and hamburgers, so they were able to, feed themselves during the day while I was at work. We've got
you saw firsthand the benefit that does for the strikers, the people on strike, and how much just a little act of kindness like that can really boost the morale on the picket lines. Because some of these pickets are horrible. The first couple of weeks, everybody's all fired up. We'll show them. But when it starts dragging on a little bit past that, they start losing it when their house payments come due, their car payments come due. The people start weakening in the knees a little bit, and the acts of kindness by the community and other unions is really what will help carry the day.
Yeah, and I really think that whenever you do have a union striking for better wages, which is most commonly what it's for, that we need to be a voice to tell people, hey, go down there and support them. That's what they need. I was able to go and get a couple county commissioners and say, why don't you come up here and have a conversation with these guys, or they'd love to hear from you. So we did a group thing. We've got the library here in town getting ready to vote next month on the 26th, I think, to unionize the library.
Right.
And so these young people, and I think that's fantastic. So I show up just to show support, so there's a lot.
With all the book banning, do we still need libraries? I mean, can't they just put a mailbox out front and leave 1 or 2 books in it?
Isn't it funny how
it's crazy?
Republicans are their own worst enemies. They put out these things, we're going to ban these books, which makes people want to read them.
Right. So I got a comment. We're streaming live on Facebook, and we invite anybody out there, if they have questions or comments, post them. We've got a comment from a good friend of mine. I haven't brought him on to do table talk yet, and I will in the near future. He's a candidate for state senate, John Keeney. And he says that individual, laugh out loud, very diplomatic. They don't care about what voters actually think outside of God, gays, guns, and minorities,
That's
which is
right.
how they win elections on cultural issues and fail miserably as public servants. We need to flip that script. And John's right. And John, I'm going to get you on in the near future on Table Talk. But ours, I know, as much as we both love each other and talk, it's going to take a while. So yeah,
Uh,
but you're talking about the book banning and critical race theory, why don't you expound on that a little bit for us?
well, that's something the current 47th rep has really taken to heart and made an issue of it at the Capitol. He actually, I went to a school board meeting and he held up a couple books and says, "You are teaching it in your schools, and here's proof." And he never did say what the books were, what he said, or anything like that. He just grandstanding. So this is this is talking in a bubble. We've already heard it. Critical race theory is the ability to critically think about how public policy affects people of color. That's what it is. And if they don't want to talk about how policy affects people of color, then they aren't representatives. So if that's exactly what Chuck's doing. He's going out demonizing CRT, going out to make public policy that's going to affect people of color in the teaching of the history of the things that they went through slavery and voter rights and all these things. So if your state reps aren't willing to critically think on issues that
Right.
matter,
Right.
then
The thing is it continues, systemic racism continues today. And it's not going to end until guys that look like us, quite bluntly,
right.
until guys look like us are not afraid to address it, hiding it, sweeping it under the rug, call it whatever you want, whitewashing it. None of that's going to change the issues that we have at hand, whether it's critical race theory or some other LGBTQ plus community. Nothing's going to change any of that until we start having the courage to address it and being responsible about how we address it. I think that's of utmost importance.
Yes, I agree.
We have to recognize our own ignorance on some of these issues and be open to what we can learn and how we can move forward as a nation and heal some of these wounds.
And I'll add to your point there. As soon as a politician thinks he knows everything, then he's not going to listen, or she, or whoever. So if you can't listen, again, you can't be a representative, because that's what your job is to listen and act,
Right.
not create a place of division and then
Right.
run politics.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they do. It's been horrible for the country, and I'm looking forward to the days when more people of color are elected to office and they can start helping drive this narrative. And I fully support, man, we got to have our nation, the leadership of our nation, whether it's at the state, let's go all the way down to the city, the county, the state, the federal level, and unions. The leadership of our unions, it should all be a reflection of the people we represent.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that we open our eyes, hearts, and minds to the fact that change is coming, and we can either embrace it or we can fight against it. I'm going to embrace it because it's long past time. Guys that look like us, I'm a boomer, guys that from my generation, we've messed things up for this country. Straight up, dude. That's how it is. There's some of that, dude. That's boomer talk there, brother. Anyway, yeah. So the school districts and funding for our school districts and the teachers pay.
I got a lot with that.
Yeah.
We've seen this push for expansion of charter schools, voucher school systems, and whatever else they want to call it. But the reality is it's a system of segregation. And what I mean by that is, if you have the ability to pay, then you can do those schools. In the meantime, if you can do those, then you're leaving the public school system, which means you're taking tax dollars away from your community,
Right.
um, putting in a for-profit system. And so whenever you push things like prisons and education and you make them colleges, I mean, you're talking a system that focuses on profits instead of people. And so this is where a lot of fraud and issues come up, is when you make it just about profit. And so whenever you're a school system, you don't have to take somebody with a disability or a certain person of color, and you can bypass separation of church and state. That all becomes dangerous because they get to teach what they want. And what they want is not what needs to be taught. We need to be teaching math and social skills and history and the common things that we need to be taught in school. So it's really a push to, in my mind, to push religion or a certain particular part of religion, Christianity, for instance. And that's where politicians put their beliefs over what really needs to be done.
Adrian, the problem with that is not everybody's going to go to college, and we all get that. There's going to be carpenters, there's going to be electricians, laborers, there's people, cooks and chefs and everything. Every segment of our society relies on people with a strong foundation of education, with good reading skills, math skills, the ability to read a tape measure or a measuring cup, you know, the ability to understand history and why we do things the way that we do it. Those are all critical thinking skills that are taught in our schools that are being neglected because people are being too focused on some of the issues that divide us. But they use those issues that divide us to get people themselves elected. And we have
Yes.
to find a way to get past that. As Keeney said earlier, we need to find a way to flip that script.
Yes.
But, you know, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, you've seen a big push at the state capitol for charter schools. And I think Betsy DeVos came to Missouri a couple of years ago, and everybody, all the Republicans went to go listen to her. But that's, you know, those charter school system, that's the rich person system. If they could, they're pushing that system for a reason. You know, the Betsy DeVos, she made tons of money off student loans. It's really about making money for them, and that's a shame, really, because we really are concerned about educating folks, not just in Missouri but in the United States, so that we can be at the top of our game compared to other countries.
Right. I agree 100%. One of the things in conversations that I've had with you in the past is corporate farming and the purchasing of land, not just in Missouri, but nationwide by foreign governments and foreign entities. Would you care to give us a little bit of information on that?
Absolutely. So our meat industry is owned by foreign corporations, multinational corporations like Smithfield, which used to be American owned, but it's now owned by the Japanese. JBS, which is Brazilian owned. And there's a couple other companies out there that are huge, but there's a lot of subsidiaries of those companies, especially when it comes to meat processing. They own 53% of our meat processing. They own 82% of our overall meat market. And it's going the same way with our grains and what we plant for food. We had a big issue with COVID through the processing plants, if you remember that. At one point, they made up for over 50% of our new COVID cases, just the processing plants, because it's such tight quarters.
Right.
Well, Trump had the opportunity to take control of that and make sure that those people could go to work safely. Instead, what Trump did is take away liability for those companies. So those companies didn't have to fear getting sued by their workers. And it was an easy decision for him to make because 51.5% of the people that work in those processing plants are immigrants. And so not only are we allowing foreign corporations to buy up, 43,000 acres has been bought up already in Missouri. And they're literally talking about, against immigrants and all this, but they're also the ones bringing them to our state through foreign corporations. So unions have an issue with illegal immigrants doing construction work. I mean, because they come in and do work that we could be doing. But I think that, when Republicans talk about how bad it is, they also need to look at themselves on making it bad also. And I don't think that immigrants doing the work is bad, because we don't really want to do that processing work.
Right.
That's hard and dirty work.
Well, I've said a long time that if you want to end, and I hate to use the term illegal immigration because I don't believe that any human is illegal, but undocumented workers coming into the United States, if you want to end it or force it to be cut way back, you go after the companies and businesses that are hiring these workers and knowingly doing it, and you put such stiff penalties on them that it makes it unprofitable for them.
Right. If you remember, I think Trump sent the ICE down, I think it was Kentucky, and rounded up a bunch of immigrants that were working in those processing plants. But the problem is with that is he didn't hold the company accountable for bringing them in.
Right.
And so that's where you have the problem. It's not the immigrants trying to make a living. It's the corporations taking advantage of low wages. Sure. And taking advantage of those folks. So,
right. So wanted to also talk to you a little bit about your district. And I like to play a little game. I call it King for a Day. And with this little game is you're the king of the 47th district, and whatever rules you come up with, whatever you say, those laws will be applied to the 47th district. And if given that opportunity, what are some of the things you would do to improve the standard of living and life of the people within your district?
That's an awesome question. We've talked about this a little bit before. We've got current representatives that do a lot of grandstanding, and they forget that they have a district to represent. Now, for example, Roachport, small community, they've got a brand new cell tower sitting at the highest point. They're right along the river. Just a nice little town, right? It has no cell phone equipment on it whatsoever. They had a couple of ladies that stalled it, didn't want it there. But the rest of those two ladies don't even live there anymore. So they can't even get the cell phone company to come out and put equipment on there because they built a tower not too far away towards the highway, and they're not willing to put equipment on that tower. But this tower is massive. And so that's something that the current state rep could be working on. Hey, let's get some equipment on there. What do we got to do to make it happen?
Right.
They've got flood issues. And a couple of years ago they had massive floods, and they were, even I was down there helping them sandbag to keep the water out of their town. They've been advocating for a wall to hold that water back for years now, and that's something that the current state rep could be doing, saying, hey, we need to advocate to get funding to build this wall at Roachport. Harrisburg, I'm a green energy guy, but those people in Harrisburg, which is not far from Columbia, don't want 55-story windmills in their backyards because they're worried about these foreign wind companies coming in and taking their land for just their windmills. So they're really concerned about that. So local control is a big issue around here. It's one thing to be for green energy, but you also have to be for local control. So you got to find that balance, or do a better job of selling green energy, or take them down a different path with green energy. And then Sturgeon, which is a new part of the district, their biggest issues, teacher retention, believe it or not. They can't hire teachers and keep them because they can't pay them nothing. And so we've got a real issue with that, especially in rural. They're all at 4 days a week now. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad deal, but I do know it's been forced down their throats because they can't afford to pay teachers and transportation costs. So they're trying to make up for it, not just for themselves, but for the teachers. A lot of those teachers in those rural communities don't live in those rural communities. So they got to drive. So they cut back to 4 days a week just to save them gas money. That's in gas prices now. We can all understand that. But I think as King for a Day, there's certain issues that we can work on that can effectively help our districts. But we got to focus on those issues instead of just letting them slide and going to national politics and just throwing mud with national politics.
Right. I read a book a little bit ago, probably about 10 or 15 years ago, called Disaster Capitalism by Naomi Klein. And in that book, they talked about how the government loves to defund a program, whether it's the education, Social Security, any government funded program, the post office. We saw Louis DeJoy doing his best to mess it up. They defund it and then they point at it and say, look, it don't work. We need to have a private takeover. Government can't do anything right. And
Right.
that's kind of one of the issues that we're seeing right now with our education system and the advancement of charter schools and private schools.
Yes.
So
That's spot on. I mean, it's all about making a fail. They do it with the IRS. I mean, they can't even go after people with money because they don't have the money to go after people with money.
right, right. And that's all by design. That's all by design. They protect themselves, but I can guarantee, I know from personal experience that if ordinary folks like us get sideways with the IRS, they have no problem coming after us.
Right. Because I can't spend a lot of money on lawyers.
Right. Adrian, tell us where the 47th district is. I know it's up by Columbia.
Yeah. So I kind of gave you a range on the little communities that are in it. It's northwest Boone County. And so it was 4 counties. Now it's all in 1 county. And it got drawn further into the city of Columbia, which made it winnable for me. So it includes the west side of Columbia, basically, Roachport, Harrisburg, and Sturgeon. So it's really quite nice. Really, I was pretty happy about it.
Good. Well, if anybody wants to do anything they can to help you, how can they find you, Adrian?
You can go to adrianplank.com. That'll get you to my website. You can go to Plank for 47 for my social media, my Facebook page. And there will be places if you want to donate or get on the mailing list, the email list. We do a couple email posts per week, usually asking for donations. But also to keep people up to date on what's going on at the Capitol and how our current representative is not worth a darn. And
Right. Well, Adrian, I've known you for a few years. You're a straight up dude. You're very, good guy. I think that the voters of your district would be crazy not to vote for you, not just because you're a union guy, but because you care about the workers. You care about the people in your district, and you'll do everything that you can to bring good jobs to that district, ensure that the jobs that are there are taken care of and the people are, those jobs are protected. But then you also branch out into strong education system, as well as farmers and protecting our farmland from foreign interests.
yes. Speaking of education, the one thing that I see that, we can always advocate for funding for teachers and education, but I think our biggest failure, especially when it comes to the teachers union, is teachers aren't allowed to strike. So we've had 7 states where teachers have been able to strike and gain more wages, not take advantage of the system, just ask for fair wages. So we really need to switch that focus, because you're not going to have Republicans going to fund more education and more funding for teachers' pay. So they got to be able to stand on them for themselves, and that comes with strike because they have no leverage.
Right. Well, you've made some great points. You're a great candidate for House District 47, and you'll be perfect for our workers up in that district. I wish you all the luck in the world, Adrian. You're a good dude, and thanks for taking time to come out of your schedule and come on. I'm going to leave the closing arguments up to you.
It's closing arguments. I appreciate you having me on, and everybody that's listening, share it. Let people know that there's a pro-union candidate out there working hard for all our union workers, and if they can support me in any manner they can, canvassers, whether it's phone banking or donations, whatever the case may be. Every candidate asks for it. Every candidate needs it.
Have you gotten any endorsements yet?
Oh yeah. Do you remember Michaela Skelton?
I do.
I got her endorsement. I got operator engineers endorsement and support, and the unions will start coming. I just sent out the AFL-CIO questionnaire, so that'll surely come. George Smith, who won the Nobel Prize here in Columbia, got his endorsement. Persephone Dikopoulos, which back in the day we got her elected to the DNC. back when Bernie was running against Hillary. Jackie Sample, who ran in the 50th district. Man.
So you've been out hustling and been out working, and
Oh yeah.
that election's going to be here before you know it. And Adrian, I wish you all the luck in the world. Jeff City would be a much better place with you roaming the halls up there. So
Yeah, I agree.
with that said, I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to come on. We'll be getting this video set up and put on our Labor Front YouTube channel. Like Adrian said, you can share it straight from the Facebook platform. Get the word out. Adrian's a great candidate. Let's work and see if we can't help him get elected. Adrian, thanks for coming on Labor Front. With that, take care, good friend.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Glenn.